We're all familiar with the concept of famous last words. Sometimes we don't know when we're uttering famous last words, and they can come off, well, sometimes ironic. One of my favorite stories is that of Civil War General John Sedgwick, who very famously said just before he died was, "What do you mean, duck? They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." Well, sometimes we actually get to plan our last words, and we can make them much more profound. Jesus' last words, as recorded in the book of Matthew, sometimes we call it the Great Commission. This is sort of the battle plan, the action plan for not only his disciples then, but for us, you and I today. And what he said was this: "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you." Sometimes we misread this a couple different ways. Yeah, we kind of get it. Yeah, you know what? We're going to make disciples of all nations. We're going to baptize them. We're going to teach them. But what we read is, therefore pastors go, or therefore missionaries go, therefore somebody else make disciples. Maybe experts do this, and somehow we just don't personalize this. That this Great Commission is something that's supposed to be owned by all Christians. That this is a way that we should be living our Christian lives. And what we see in this is 4 basic action words: go, make, baptize, and teach. And all of these 4 words make up basic steps in the discipleship process. Now, the discipleship process isn't fundamentally different than the biological process. And we could kind of think that we have a biological Great Commission. We're supposed to fill the earth and multiply. Well, there are 4 basic steps in that Great Commission too. First, you need to go out and find yourself a spouse. Second thing you need to do is you have to actually make babies. Then, when the babies are born, you have to raise the babies. And then lastly, you need to kick the babies out of your house so they can go make babies of their own. If you do those 4 things, multiplication happens and the whole planet gets filled with people. If you miss just one of those steps, everything comes crashing down and your line ends with you. If you never leave the house and go find a spouse, nothing's going to happen. Spouses don't fall from the sky. You need to go out and get one. Second thing, if you don't actually make any babies, well, you're going to end up dying alone. Third thing is, you need to raise the babies. Now, even if you've never had children, all of us, I think, have been children, and recognize that parenthood doesn't end at childbirth. You need to raise babies. You need to teach them. They come out as little barbarians. You need to civilize them. But that last step is you need to kick them out of the house so they can go make babies of their own. When we miss that last step, what we get is a 40-year-old living in our basement watching Star Trek. That isn't getting anybody anywhere. Well, what works in biology also works with the spiritual Great Commission. We need to actually go. It doesn't say sit and wait. It means actual go and make disciples. Make people who follow Jesus. Then we need to baptize them, introduce them into the Christian family, and then once they're in that Christian family, we need to teach them to obey everything that Jesus has taught us, including the command to go. When we do all 4 of those things, the message of the gospel and changed lives just explodes. This is the recipe for spiritual revolution, for world transformation. This is why the church still exists 2,000 years later, and why Christians can be found on every continent and every country. However, in our own personal lives, sometimes we end up in the spot of being a 40-year-old virgin watching Star Trek. That's what happens when we miss some of those steps. If we never go, we just sit and wait, nothing happens. And too many of our churches do that. It's a sit and wait instead of therefore go. Even if we do go, we need to actually make disciples. We need to teach people about Jesus and to follow him. Once they've made that step, then we need to baptize them, introduce them into the Christian community. And then lastly, we need to teach them to do everything that Christ has taught us, including the command to follow the Great Commission. Unfortunately, most of us in the church, when we do try to take this seriously, we do it backwards. We try teaching first. We try loading people up with lots and lots and lots of information, lots and lots of information. And then maybe they'll take the step of being baptized, which is a pretty big deal. You get a certificate and everything. After they've been baptized, maybe, if they're really, really serious about their faith, they'll become a disciple. And after they've been a disciple, if they're like the super ninja elite, well then, you know what? Then they'll therefore go. They'll be a missionary or pastor or something. Well, that's the exact opposite order of what Jesus taught us to do things in. He told us to go first, to go out, make disciples, have people follow Jesus right off the bat. Then, that's when we baptize them, that's when we teach them, and that's when we send them out. One of the biggest problems we've had is that we haven't done this. Now, where we have, we see life change, and where we don't, we don't. There's one part of the Great Commission I've left out, and it's at the very end. Even though God has given us all these specific steps to take and things to do and a mission to accomplish, it's not something we do alone. It's not something we do in our own strength. At the very end, Jesus says, "Surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." That's one of the exciting things about the Great Commission. Yes, we've been given an awesome purpose in life. We've been given a task that our lives make a difference, that we live lives of consequence. But we don't do it alone. We don't do it in our power. We're still doing a lot of doing, but we're doing it with Christ, who's always promised never to leave us or to forsake us.